I wouldn't mind if you put it on an airplane mode. And if it still is ungovernable, you can remove the battery. So, yes. And again, as we wait, I would like to say UNISA this year is celebrating 145 years. And it is 100 years ago that UNISA moved to this city of Mama Sisulu and Nelson Mandela, because the same year we moved to this city. UNISA has almost 1 million alumni members, which is bigger than some of the small countries just having gone through here. We do have a guest Wi-Fi code that will also be distributed to the media. I think it has been, or it will be, but I'll get an indication. We'll soon be starting. There is one piece of information that we received, that Steve Biko registered with UNISA, and the family is here. And Steve Biko's father also was a student here. I think for that, our bond with the Biko family is quite strong. Whilst Madiba did Toitoi at Forte, at Vets and so forth, this is about the place that gave him 2 qualifications degrees. He didn't get it from the other places, but it was because of circumstances. We do have a registration of about 350. We account for almost 1/3 of South Africa's, graduation rates in many fields. So UNISA is a mega institution. We are the largest in the African continent, largest in the Southern Hemisphere. But one day we met with the Chinese Open University when we thought we were big. And they said they only have something like 4 million. I will now ask that we rise as we welcome our guests. Thank you. You may be seated. Without any waste of time, as we start the 19th annual Steve Biko Memorial Lecture on this day, the 14th of September, 2018, I think it's proper for us to start with the singing of our national anthem. Thank you. We may be seated. I realized that the music was becoming ungovernable. But it will catch up with the spirit of the moment. Things do happen. There was one institution, as we're about to start in the US, a cassette. It was in Cincinnati. But then on the other side, the person fast forwarded, it sang Malaika. And the program director said, I never knew South African anthem was so beautiful. It was difficult to retrieve that congratulation. So without any waste of time, before we settle down, let's call upon our Vice Chancellor and Principal so that he can extend a welcome to all of us. Then we can feel free to envy the VC acknowledging so many leaders per square meter. I looked around and I realized that from the young to the old, the student leaders, the government leaders, the business leaders, the diplomats are here. But we also have people watching us and following the event from King Williamstown, Ginsberg, in Brazil, abroad, and several other countries. Nkosinathi normally remembers each and every one of them. So I'll wait for his signal. So let's call upon and
Nafigeni, our program director, thank you so much for this opportunity. His Excellency President Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, Minister Naledi Pandor, Minister of Higher Education and Training, Kosi Patekile Holomisa, Deputy Minister of Labor, Mr. Andres Snell, Deputy Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Ms. Tembi, Minister of Finance, Mr. Trevor Manuel, Chairman of Old Mutual Limited and former Minister of Finance, and Mrs. Maria Ramos, Mr. Saki Similane, the Chairman of the UNISA Council, Mrs. Similane, and all the members of UNISA Council who are present here tonight, Mrs. Mandu Makanya, Mrs. Nonsigalelo Bigo, Mr. Nkosinati Biko, the founder and executive trustee of the Steve Biko Foundation, and Mrs. Biko and other members of the Biko family present. Your Excellency, Ambassador Bene Mpoko, Ambassador, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners present, Your Majesties, Nkosi Zanelizwe Dalinjebo, Nkosi Tlanti Sikau, Nkosi Ahlangene Sikau, Nkosi Mziwoxolo Chali, Princess Mandlakazi Sikau, Nkosana Patrick Nzobi, Mr. Ismail Nkabela, the chairman of the Steve Biko Foundation and other members of the foundation present, but also Mrs. Nkabela, Dr. Brigalia Bam, chairman of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, members of the UNISA Executive and Extended Management, the former UNISA office bearers, starting with Judge Bernard Ngwepe and Mrs. Daphne Ngwepe. Judge Ngwepe is the former Chancellor of UNISA, but also the former Judge President of the North and South Gauteng High Courts. And I want to greet all the members of the judiciary who are with us here tonight. Professor Bani Nyamego Pichana, the former Principal and Vice Chancellor of UNISA, and Mrs. Dimza Pichana. Representatives from national, provincial, local educational institutions, organizations, and foundations present, members of the ecclesiastical community, representatives from various political parties in attendance, members of the business community, members of the university community, representatives from various student bodies present, leaders of our national SRC and all the SRCs from our sister universities, leaders of organized labor at UNISA and our country, representatives from various media houses present, distinguished members of the audience, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Dumelang bagais. Abshein. Nda. Rialocha. Huyenand. Molweni. Bonsoir. I've got you there. On behalf of the University of South Africa and our partner, the Steve Biko Foundation, I'm pleased to welcome all of you to this historic 19th Biko Annual Memorial Lecture this evening. We embrace you all in the spirit of Ubuntu. Each time we hold these flagship memorial lectures, the country remembering this iconic intellectual and liberation struggle icon, the giant, the tower, Steve Bantu Biko. This tells us that he belonged to his family, he belonged to his community, he belonged to his organization, he belonged to us all. A resounding testimony, if ever we needed such, that his legacy remains timely and timeless. Steve Biko was one of the central figures in the struggle against the apartheid regime. His greatness is attested, his voice still reverberates from generation to generation, informing conversations and debates in our country, our continent, and the global community. So you will find when I say that it is an honor for me to thank the Biko family, the Steve Biko Foundation, for the partnership that has seen this flagship memorial lecture growing from strength to strength. UNISA is pleased to play our part in its growth and the promotion of Biko's Black consciousness ideology and ethos to all corners of our society through community outreach and engagement programs. To the Biko, this partnership is always appreciated and respected. In saying this, ladies and gentlemen, it will be remiss of me not to say that we gather tonight to remember Steve Biko, 41 years since his brutal murder by the apartheid regime. We are also reminded of the recently departed struggle stalwarts, such as Mama Zondeka Sobukwe, Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Brahu Masekela, Minister Zola Skweyiya, Professor Willie Khositsile, Ambassador George Nene, as well as our iconic year. So many and so sad. It is also 40 years since the death of Ndade Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, and 10 years since the death of Mama Miriam Makeba. Each one of these names and great personalities should remind us forcefully that freedom did not come cheaply. So many leaders suffered and were tortured, many of them paying the ultimate price, thus robbing their families of their fathers, their mothers, their uncles, their aunts, their sons, their daughters. As we gather here, we are also reminded of the centenary late President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, who will have celebrated their 100th year birthdays this year. Quite fittingly, this also coincides with UNISA's celebration of its move from the city of Cape Town to Tshwane in 1918. All of the great names and lives that I've just mentioned, and so many, many others that we are honoring, they are honored markers of the milestones of our epic journey and our unceasing quest for social justice. As we gather here tonight, we are mindful of the immense socio-economic challenges that we are facing today and the volatile global context. Mindful of the decisions that we take either individually or collectively will determine the trajectory of our country and the signal to the world whether or not we are willing and able to give true meaning to the world and the promises that are associated with our liberation and democracy. The common theme and voices from our universities, our cities, our villages, our townships, our farms, our informal settlements, is that we cannot underrate social justice and overrate reconciliation. He delivered the Nelson Mandela Lecture in 2010 and captured the essence of our quest for social justice when he said, and I quote, "We cannot undo the damage of the past, but we must strive instead to undo the damage to the future. We must prove in our actions tomorrow that we learned from the terrors and the sins of yesteryear." As we continue on our task of nation building, we should be reminded of the timeless relevance of Steve Biko's Black consciousness ideology, which recognizes the most potent tool in galvanizing society towards nation building by pricking our sense of agency as authors of our destiny and captains of our journey to that destiny. You Your Excellency, President Ramaphosa, you are the helm of our republic, and we are all working with you as you chaperone all of us along the path that we shall be taking to confront and overcome these challenges. It is therefore more appropriate, especially this evening, simply because of your own role and being part of the Black consciousness, which was part and parcel of your own political heritage in the early years of your political activism, that you are going to. I just want to make a confession that with my eyes that are moving around, I've actually picked up Mrs. Zanele Mbeki, the former First Lady of our Republic, and I'm greeting her formally. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all invited here tonight to enjoy ourselves because we are going to be hearing from the President of the Republic communicating to us on a journey of reflection on this 19th Steve Biko Memorial Lecture. I can guarantee you that this is going to be, and we are hoping that they will not only flourish in the ZK Matthews Great Hall, not only with those that we are connected to who are receiving this lecture directly, but also to those that may not necessarily be having access in a direct sense of the word, that we have a responsibility of ensuring that this message reaches every human being from wherever they are, because this is the only way in which we can build the future that we all want. With these few words, I just want to say, you are most welcome. If you are welcome to this university, take it as your students always say, Vice Chancellor, remember, it's the university of the land. So with those few words, you are most welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, VC. Let's put our hands again together for the VC. As we were marking the 145 years, I wondered sitting what would happen if those who were there when it was still University of Good Hope were to wake up and they ask for direction, then they say, Owar Tambo building for admin. When they turn for music, they say Miriam Makeba. They come to this hall, they say ZK Matthews. To the other one, Steve Biko building. Such is diversity at UNISA. We live it, we embrace it. Such is diversity. Enoch Sontonga somewhere. Now, I'm going to call upon a person who is a torchbearer, who has kept the flame of the Biko legacy and foundation in particular burning, with his quiet and yet determined energy. And our partnership, as the VC was saying, with the Steve Biko Foundation is one of the best. Let's put our hands together for that. It is a gift that keeps on giving. Now I call upon Nkosinathi Biko. Let's put our hands together for Nkosinathi.
Comrade President, I do not think that I can do a better job with the pleasantries than the Deputy Vice Chancellor. And so allow me to simply say in comradely language, seconded, Vice Chancellor. I am, however, a product of two constituencies. And one of them is a constituency called Towers. And so I'd like to recognize the political leadership present here, particularly those organizations that have embraced Steve Biko consistently for many, many years. I have also met with the leadership of the Fees Must Fall, who asked me, Mr. President, to whisper to you, which I hereby do, regarding the matter of their comrades who are in jail. They said to say that as a former detainee yourself, you will be familiar with the contents of the motivation. Thank you. The 12th of September marked the 41st commemoration of the murder of Comrade Bantu Stephen Biko. As usual, we received numerous messages from home, across the continent and the diaspora, and from many progressive forces around the world. I believe that we are represented here by our own political leadership, but they are also representatives of 25 governments that are present with us today. So many people who held commemorative events around the country, who created artistic productions, who wrote opinion pieces, who tweeted, called in to radio stations, and who altered their online profiles in salutation. I must also confess that I received a few please call me's. Now, those are also appreciated. It would appear, Comrade President, that even when the rand is low, there is still sufficient social capital, and we welcome those messages. Had Steve Biko lived, he would be 72 years today. The average age of his colleagues who are here in numbers is 70. This is a generation that understood its role, they seized the baton, and they sprinted the nation towards democracy. And we salute those that are present here. With each passing year, I am forever grateful for the leadership and gift and the example of your old man and his fellow travelers in our country and across the diaspora. They bequeathed unto us an independence, a pride in our heritage, and belief in our innate ability as a people, end quote. Regrettably, we have lost many of these comrades. And as I speak, I know of at least 3 of them who are in prison, who are in hospital, and we wish them a speedy recovery. We are, however, comforted in the knowledge that a number of them still have some spring in them, and they will soon express themselves on the dance floor, Goomba style, if you give them a chance. I do suspect. Now, it's not so much the dying of the dance, I think, that we must bemoan. It's the fading of memories. I think it's the abundance of ignorance that we are seeing. And I visited a government department a few months ago and witnessed how veterans were being treated who had gone to process some of their social benefits. Many of these heroes and sheroes of our struggle have not ever shared their suffering, let alone their contribution to freedom and democracy. They have not ever solicited undue benefits. They have no statue dedicated to their honor. They have no street, no bridge, no school, no community hall named or dedicated to them. And they have become blurred images in their communities and in their families. Steven Spielberg produced the movie Schindler's List. He took some of the proceeds and he conducted an international oral history project and has gone on to record 50,000 survivors of the Holocaust experience. And this project has provided the most valuable archival database to young scholars and historians. And I implore you, Mr. President, that it is in order to consider investing some of our own national resources towards a similar project for our own history in South Africa. And it would seem to me that we cannot delink the why question from the what question. The question, what, which speaks to the things that must be done, seems to have challenges because we have. And we watched in amazement earlier this month when we had to chastise a foreign leader who inserted himself in local politics. A person, by the way, regarded by his own people as a person needing rescuing from his own worst impulses. We watched in astonishment as parliamentarians dealt with an offensive ahistorical narrative on the land question, as we saw some of the presentations there. And we were reminded by Eusebius Makaiser and Sizwe Mpofu Welsh, the two young South Africans with beautiful minds, that our commitment to freedom of expression does not create an obligation to extend gratuitous, disproportionate airtime to these voices. The Steve Biko Foundation was established in 2017. One way we have elected to celebrate this year is to bring together the 70s generation in King Williamstown in the second week of December. There are three objectives. The first is to conduct dialogue. The second is to conduct the first lot of oral history interviews with a special focus on those who are seniors, and there are many of them who are already in the age group of about 80 or so. And the last purpose is to Gumba. So I'm going to ask you to please spread the word, and as you go back home, look at your KISS, your archives, your family albums, and see how it is that we can organize ourselves towards. Next Monday, the foundation turns 20. And I wanted to commend the young men and women who have kept it going for the many years. I want to also thank the board, Mr. Mkabela, my chair, Mr. Millard Arnold, Professor Huapa, and Mrs. Biko, who have climbed many a hill together, but who remain invigorated. I would like to pay a special tribute to Mrs. Biko. As we gather here, elsewhere in the country, in the town of Robert Sobukwe in Kimberley, the National Heritage Council has a different event at which they are honoring her. She is a recipient of the Ubuntu Award for the year 2018. That if my mother is getting an Ubuntu Award, then it is well deserved. I have an uncle, he is now late, Dr. Mashalaba was his name, who, when my father sent a group of negotiators to negotiate for a hand in marriage, was rather disturbed by my father's shabby shoes. He was a snobbish fellow. And little did he know, though, that those shoes would carry my parents not only beyond the threshold, but on a journey of infinite miles. And he would introduce her on this journey as my woman, the ultimate embodiment of Black is Beautiful. So we have witnessed you, Mandlovu, honoring him for many, many years. We continue to witness the work that you do and celebrated in Kimberley. A few weeks ago, you were in Graaff-Reinet to also honor Mrs. Sobukwe. And Mrs. Sobukwe herself was a worthy recipient of the Order of Lutuli in silver, in recognition of her role in the fight against apartheid and the steadfast support of political prisoners. We must thank the Black House Collective, a group of young people from Soweto, who submitted a just-in-time motivation to allow us to celebrate Mrs. Sobukwe during her lifetime. For many years, the nation has decried the absence of the PAC and the legacy of Robert Sobukwe from the place of honor in South Africa, as it has Azapo, Steve Biko, and many others. Now, when an outstanding player in a professional team is selected to the club, and however much this may frustrate the club and its own plans. Now, Comrade President, you did very well in honoring Mrs. Sobukwe with a state funeral. She is a national asset. It was the correct thing to do. I suspect, though, that there are some lessons to be learned towards finding the sweet balance between country and club, between nation and party. And perhaps Mrs. Sobukwe's last gift to us is this challenge of finding our way around this question, reflecting on the place of honor, the time for honor, and the ways of honor. Comrade President, you yourself were recently selected into the national team as captain of Team South Africa. That your selection by your club on the 18th of December, which coincides with Steve Biko's birthday, was a birthday gift. And you will be familiar with the sense of anticipation that precedes the unwrapping of a birthday gift. Those of us who grew up in the days of Lucky Package know this. It stands to bring you great joy, Mr. President. But there is always the hope, always the faint possibility that it might disappoint. In the build-up to your selection, your club ran a gruesome internal selection process. And for the first time within the ruling party, the two primary contenders were both Baptists of the waters of black consciousness. You have been assigned to lead, and we have asked you to share with us, this provides us with answers to the challenges in your in-tray. Lastly, around 1974, the conversation on the economic thrust of the black consciousness movement began to coagulate around the concept of communalism. At the center of communalism is the impulse of a shared prosperity built out of individual productivity. If a member of a community is less productive, those of greater means extend such means in order to lift them to a better place and for the greater good. A prosperous neighbor would lend a needy neighbor a cow in order for the family to sustain itself, which cow would be recalled at the discretion of the owner. Because the concept of well-being, the inquiry of their well-being, in the plural narrative, siyaphila, we are all well. This arrangement gives rise to the expression, inkomo enqoma, insenge ebhekwa. You milk the lone cow with the occasional peep over your shoulder. As an avid cattle farmer, Mr. President, you will know that a cow yields best when it feeds best. Yehlisa. A wise, needy neighbor will be concerned with more than just today's meal. He will head the cow to green pastures in order to safeguard the future meals, the resilience of his community, and that his debt is soon settled and the favor extended. Every 5 years, political parties become the needy neighbor. They seek a mandate from the citizens. We are approaching such a window in the not so distant future. We have been here before, and we have lost many a cow. We anticipate that this time the gift box contains a gift of wise leadership. We anticipate that the various clubs will avail the best the league has to offer towards the formation of a national team. We anticipate that the national captain will fly the national flag. We evaluate the well-being of the lone cow and exercise their discretion wisely. We anticipate that the neighbor will have learned much from milking the cow dry. He will have seen the wisdom of letting it multiply. We owe this well-being to Mandela, Sobukwe, and Biko. But most importantly, We owe this to the unknown soldier whose only dividend is the dignity of our people. Thank you.
Wow. The metaphors, the idioms, the proverbs. Kosinathi is a leader in his own right. And a tribute to the mother. Igama lamakhosikazi. Igama lamakhosikazi. Siyabulela Mandlovu. As now we move towards Uvutondaba, the apex, some of you might have noticed me moving from that side to that side. They said I was on the way of cameras. Produce the paper, they say a white balance, and I asked them, when are we going to have the black balance? Because this is the problem. Said your sector won't transform as long as you are always trying the white balance. Without any waste of time, I'll now invite our Vice Chancellor once more to present to us our keynote speaker, our Vice Chancellor, Professor Mokanya. Let's put our hands together for him.
No, thank you so much, Program Director. I'm expected to introduce in this country, or to simply say, this is the president who is the product of this country, the product of ordinary men and women that you find everywhere in the corners of this country. That he is a product of our own schooling system that we have all gone through, so which means that he is one of us and like us. But the main thing that I just want to share with you is that President Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa studied with this great university, UNISA. So that anything that we can forget, we must remember that he obtained his BProc degree at the University of South Africa, hence his role of becoming a lawyer and how he transitioned from that position of being a lawyer into the trade union movement, which he led so outstandingly. And thereafter, his role in our liberation movements, as we've heard, but also in the current African National Congress and the manner in which he has conducted himself over the years, which continues to be a pride. Leaders who lead so that those of us can follow and accompany him in that journey that takes us to that promised land. Mr. President, it is now my honor to invite you to come and share with us what we have in store for us. And we are looking at that with so much excitement. Thank you so much, President.
Tumamina Mongameli. Inkosi must time this kakasivumile bantu bakuthi. Mr. President, the chosen one, university. A true definition of what's meant to be yours will always be yours. Cereal, the most important meal of the day, no conflicts. izinto azimtaka ngqika ikati leleziko nyane kufuneka sibe ngumntu omnye kufuneka sibophe ibhanti kufuneka sisinde ngokholoza siqala ibhafalo zenikhumbule sizwe ikawutyiwilile mdantsane basifundela ulwazi kubantu Steve Biko masibe sisizwe sikolayo mabakolele abafundi befizz masoli sizwe yolonto ndisithi kakulamjene Pakama Ramaphosa ixesha lifikile Pakama Ramaphosa ixesha lifikile Long live the spirit of black consciousness, long live.
Long live.
Hayi bantu baseRhawutini niyazithanda iindaba. Yo!
Comrades, please, the point now that the point has been made, can we please commence with the lecture? Thank you, comrades.
Program Director, Dr. Somadota Figeni, members of the Biko family, Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of South Africa, Professor Mandla Makhanya, trustees of ministers, members of the judiciary, Usis Zanele Mbeki, Professor Bani Pichana, the former Vice Chancellor of this institution, student leaders, labor leaders, Your Majesties, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, and high commissioners, and leaders of various political parties that are represented here. And ladies and gentlemen, I am greatly indebted to the Biko family, the Steve Biko Foundation, and the University of South Africa for allowing me the honor to deliver the 19th Annual Biko Memorial Lecture. I have a few. Steve Biko, as president of the South African Student Organization, was my leader as I was the chair of the Teflo branch of SASO So it is an honor to deliver this lecture in his memory today. I never got to meet Steve Biko, but I had lived in the hope that as a branch chairperson of his organization at the University of the North, that I would meet him when he comes visiting our branch. I'm sad that it never happened. He and other leaders of SASO decided on a campaign to have 1974. Well, their decision got me arrested for organizing the Pro-Frelimo rally. So I have a bone to pick with Steve Biko. When I meet him, I will pick this bone with him that he got me arrested and finally expelled from my university before I could get my degree. Hence, I finally had to come to UNISA. But the other important thing is that it is a real honor to deliver this lecture at UNISA, my alma mater. During the year when we celebrate the centenary of Nelson Mandela and Umama Albertina Sisulu, Madiba had huge respect for Steve Biko, and in our discussions, he often spoke very fondly of Steve Biko and mourned his untimely departure from our land. Earlier this week, we commemorated the 41st anniversary of the death and detention of Steve Biko. In its fear and desperation, in its brutality and callous disregard for life, the apartheid state inflicted a devastating loss on the Biko family and on our nation. The murder of Steve Biko reverberated across the world, reinforcing. In the week that we commemorate a cruel death, we also honor and celebrate a truly remarkable life. A life that was cut too short, too young. It was a life dedicated to the pursuit of freedom, of equality, justice, and truth. It was the life of a great but humble revolutionary who fiercely rejected the false hierarchy of races. He spoke with a burning eloquence of the essential humanity of all people. He understood that the system of apartheid was predicated on the delicate lie of white supremacy and black inferiority. He knew too to preserve white economic privilege at the direct expense and to the exclusion of the black majority. The philosophy of Steve Biko was fundamentally the antithesis of this lie. It was about establishing the principles on which a new and more humane society would be established in our country. He made this very clear when he said, "We have set out on a quest for true humanity, and somewhere in the distant horizon, we can see the glittering prize. Let us march forward from our common plight and our brotherhood." In time, he continued, we shall be in a position to bestow upon South Africa the greatest possible gift, a more humane face, close quotes. But where did this all come from? We can ask ourselves. Ian McQueen writes in his book, Black Consciousness and the Progressive Movements Under Apartheid. And he writes that Black consciousness movement was a protean movement, diverse trajectories of the ideas molded to fit a purpose, to resuscitate Black pride and to generate a renewed project of political empowerment. Black consciousness emphasizes the way of life which those oppressed by apartheid should adopt to embody a liberated mind, close quotes. What Steve Biko sought to articulate was really the lived experience of Black people and to restore the true humanity of all people, Black and white, and to build a society in which there would be no majority nor minority. There would just be people, free for a true humanity that must lie at the core of our every endeavor. For decades, this quest has been a constant companion to the struggles of our people for freedom, dignity, and respect. It was present at the formation of liberation movements, during the campaigns of defiance, during the strikes and stayaways and armed resistance that our people embarked upon. It is found within seminal documents like the African Claims, the Freedom Charter, in the writings of Pixley Kaisa Kaseme, Sol Plaatje, Alex Laguma, Bessie Head, Steve Biko, and many others. As we confront new and sometimes unexpected challenges, we are driven by this goal. To succeed, we must start, as Steve Biko did, with affirming our own sense of self. Biko taught us Biko taught us the revolutionary value of the confidence of Black people in their own humanity and identity. He spoke of the debilitating effect of centuries of colonialism and oppression on the psyche, a sense of inferiority. His answer, Black consciousness, was for the Black person to see themselves as being complete in themselves. It was a philosophy that embraced the confidence as well as the optimism of the African-American poet and social activist Langston Hughes, who wrote, I quote, "I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and I eat well and I grow strong. Tomorrow I will be at the table, eat in the kitchen. Then, besides, they will see how beautiful I am and be ashamed because I too am America," close quotes. Now, Langston Hughes, Steve Biko, or like Langston Hughes, Steve Biko sought to lead his people to claim their rightful place at the table of humanity. Not under the table, not next to the table, not by the table, but at the table of humanity. That's what Steve Biko wanted us to have. While some regard black ideas that Steve pronounced are timeless and universal, they are no less powerful and no less relevant today, precisely also in our own country. Even as we have defeated apartheid, even as we have built a democratic state, the psychological and physical vestiges of institutionalized racism still persist to this day. Even today, we observe in ways both subtle and crude the residue of some amongst our white compatriots who have a sense of entitlement and a dose of arrogance. But in some circles, we also observe the prejudice that lurks below the surface is, from time to time, given virulent expression. It is a measure of the progress we have made and the impact of leaders like Steve Biko, Oliver Tambo, and many others that society reacts with revulsion to racist outbursts that seem to occur in the country from time to time. While naked racism is an aberration, the material manifestation of racism, white wealth and black poverty is the norm. Feelings of inferiority that manifest in submission and also deal with the superiority that is expressed in supremacy. This should then enable us to work to overcome the economic and social inequality that underpins them. This is not confined to race. Throughout history, there are few relationships more unequal than those between men and women. Women bear the brunt of centuries of discrimination and oppression. Discrimination and oppression that is imposed, in this case, not by a colonial power, but by the traditions, practices. The struggle against patriarchy is therefore a struggle against the social norms, the attitudes and the thoughts that embolden men and enfeeble women. As black consciousness is a necessary part of the response to racism, so too is the self-affirmation of women necessary for the achievement of gender equality in our country as well. The assertion by women of their own power and their own agency is the foundation on which we must work together to eradicate all forms of manifestations of condition for the improvement of the economic status of women and the achievement of real equality in all areas of life. Our quest for a true humanity requires that we should address the inequality between men and women and bring it to an end in our country, in our lifetime as well. Our continued quest also for a true humanity requires that we end poverty, is denied the basic requirements of life, food, shelter, water, security, and work. When poverty is so widespread, when it is so deeply embedded in the structure of society, when it has existed for so long, as any of us can remember, then there is a real danger that we learn to live with it, we learn to accept it, and we find it acceptable and regard it as part and parcel of our existence. We should not and cannot accept that poverty is an inevitable feature, because the face of poverty in South Africa is that of an African woman. Our task is to address the racial and gender dimensions of this economic exclusion. This means, in the first instance, that we must educate the black child and the girl child. If we are to end the transmission of poverty and accept it being intergenerational, moving from one generation to the next generation, we must ensure that every child receives from their earliest years. This is the reason why we have invested so extensively in early childhood development and why we have made higher education free to the children of the poor and the working class. It is for this reason, too, that we continue to give attention to the physical state of our schools, the availability of resources, and the quality of learning, teaching, and leadership. But despite the progress that we have made over the last 2 decades, inequality in education remains one of the greatest obstacles to the achievement of a just society that Steve Biko so sought to struggle for. The fault lines of race, gender, class, and geography are nowhere more distinct than in access to a decent education. Unless we correct this as a matter of priority, we will not reduce inequality and we will not end poverty in our country. This requires a shift in social mindset, where few things are valued more than knowledge and learning, where parents, relatives, friends, and neighbors. It requires teachers, principals, administrators, elected representatives, and political formations who place at the center of their efforts the promotion of educational excellence. We must be a society where the burning of a school, the trashing of a library, is a great affront to our sense of moral purpose. Our quest for true humanity must be rooted in a genuine sense of solidarity. For the last 3 centuries, the history of enabled the enrichment of the few. Today, our people continue to live that history. The shadow of that history continues to dog our people on a continuous basis. Millions live without work, without land, without security, without opportunity. And yet our Constitution, which is readily embraced by all South Africans, enjoins us not only to recognize the injustices of the past, but also to ensure equitable redress of historical inequity. Since the advent of the poor, providing assets in the form of land and houses, equalizing spending on education, health and social grants, and investing in infrastructure in previously neglected areas. We have enacted legislation and implemented policies to improve the representation of Black people, women, and the disabled in the economy, to encourage the development of Black and women entrepreneurs, and to increase Black ownership of the economy. These efforts have met with some success, not full, or reduce inequality or overcome exclusion. We are therefore called upon to embark on an extensive program of fundamental redistribution that will close the gap between those who have and those who do not have, between white and Black, and between men and women, and between rural and urban as well. It requires the involvement of all within our society, with those who have most been prepared to make the greatest contribution. It requires a recognition by those who are the beneficiaries of decades of racial privilege in ending privilege and effecting redress. This has to be a national task, and it is pivoted around a value that Steve Biko promoted so well, solidarity. And it is in this regard that we call upon our compatriots, those who have become so well endowed, to reach out to those who are still right at the bottom. And this is a moment that this country should come together. This is the moment that is called for people to act in solidarity. Inequality severely constrains our ability as a country to realize our potential. It limits our growth, perpetuates hardship, and promotes instability. We must therefore become a society that is defined by solidarity, not by competition. We must become a society that is defined by compassion and not by selfishness. A society that is defined by generosity. Those who have followed the history of the Black consciousness movement closely will remember that the Black consciousness movement was deeply rooted in encouraging those amongst Black people who had become better off to demonstrate their compassion by getting involved in community work. Unlike its characterization as a movement of predominantly intellectuals, the Black consciousness activists had a strong ethos of community involvement, and students were encouraged to plow back their skills. A practical expression of this was how the Black consciousness movement went around setting up a number of community-based facilities, be they clinics and a number of them, in the deep rural areas of our country to empower our people. Dr. Matamela Ramaphosa was at the cutting edge of this development as she, as a doctor, set up a clinic in one of the deepest rural areas to serve our people as a medical graduate. This has to be applauded. One wishes that that ethos of giving back could come back, particularly among the young people of our country. That once they have been endowed with an education, and those amongst us who've become endowed with progress and who have succeeded in our lives should be filled with a sense of generosity and be able to plow back and to give back. Today, as we celebrate Steve Biko's life, this for me has come back very prominently to memory, that this is what Steve Biko was also very much about, what many people must give effect to the expression from each according to their ability, to each according to their needs. Our quest for a true humanity requires that we have leaders of integrity and a society that values honesty and hard work. As we emerge from the corruption of apartheid, we are called upon to forge a new morality which places the interests of the people above the narrow interests of the individual, which places the interests of the people as a whole above the narrow and selfish interests of individual leaders. We must acknowledge with shame and regret that we have failed to live up to the standards of the selfless leaders that came before us. We now know of powerful individuals who use positions of authority to plunder the resources of the people, threatening our economic sustainability and further impoverishing our people. We now know of business leaders, of people, whose reckless and fraudulent actions eroded the savings of many ordinary people as well. Astounded as we are by the devastating audacity to the corruption that has taken hold in many institutions across government. But this also applies across the corporate sector. This requires firm, decisive, and united action. We have begun the work, but there is still much more to be done. Commissions of inquiry, disciplinary hearings, criminal prosecutions, and lengthy prison sentences are necessary instruments to tackle this scourge. We will not succeed unless we forge a new morality. We need leaders who serve with diligence and commitment, seeking neither advantage nor undue rewards for themselves. Every citizen needs to respect the rights and property of others, respect the law, and know that you will also be respected by the law. We must rise above the differences of color, faith, creed, and affiliation to pursue a common mission. The non-racial character of our nation, see ourselves as a nation being consolidated. We must draw on the example of Steve Biko, who belonged to a special generation of young and fearless patriots who kept the flames of liberation burning. He and leaders like Professor Harry Nengwekulu, who's here, and Reverend Bani Pichana, bequeathed to us as a nation a cohort of leaders as the original leaders of the Black Consciousness Movement. They bequeathed to us, to our nation, a cohort of leaders who were politicized in the South African Students' Organization, consciousness movement gave rise to an enduring consciousness amongst oppressed South Africans who found political homes in different organizations but shared a common commitment to end a crime against humanity that apartheid was. Bantu Steve Biko led people, not parties. His revolution was that of the mind, not one of membership. The alumni of his movement, and I'm one of them, are spread right across many formations and are found in many parts of the revolutionary whose epoch-defining ideas contributed significantly in making South Africa what it is today. His thoughts continue to guide us in our quest for a true humanity. And it is this humanity that we must find. And it is this moral compass that we must find if we are indeed to accede to the level that Steve Biko wanted us to accede to. This is the time for us to march forth, as Steve Biko called, to bestow upon South Africa the greatest gift possible, a South Africa with a human face, a South Africa that has embraced humanity, a South Africa where all of us feel that we are regaining our humanity as a nation and as a people. Thank you very much.
In essence, the message was saying, Buya Buntu Betu. Let our humanity be restored and human solidarity without wasting time. I'll call upon the cohort of that golden generation to come forward to give a token of appreciation to our keynote speaker. You heard from the, and Professor Nengwekulu is here with us. He was with Steve Biko, and Professor Pichana was here with us. I'm not name dropping. I'm just UNISA shining. So I'll call upon Professor Pichana, Professor Nengwekulu, and our chairperson of council and the VC to come forward together with Unkosinathi, handing over that token of appreciation, the lecture itself. I do know that at times I've pronounced on a gift only to find that it's still in a factory or the artist is still finishing an ear or something. But I'm hoping that the synchrony this time around is well placed. So let's call upon Professor Pichana, Professor Nengwekulu, the VC, the chair, and these are these are the contemporaries Thank you very much. I'm sure even that camera, which was still changing the mode, is now sorted, given the time. Let's put our hands together. I'll now ask us to remain standing as we allow our dignitaries exit. I can assure you the meal is the same in all serving points. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you very much. Yaleboha. Ndoribuwa. Thank you very much. And for those in Brazil, thank you very much, comrades. Thank you very much, colleagues, our leaders. Thank you. Now the lecture has come to an end.